Appreciate it. So if I've not met you yet, my name is Sean. I'm the worship pastor here, and I should probably say something about our worship ministry while I'm up here, right? I don't know if you noticed, we have a fantastic Roland keyboard over there. Isn't it nice? Man, nobody played that this morning. Our wonderful bass player this morning, Tim, servant's heart. He is such a servant that he played bass even though he's not a bass player. Tim played bass because I didn't have any bass players this morning. I love playing drums. You know what I love more than playing drums? Equipping others to play drums. See where I'm going? There's a theme here. There are musicians hiding in our midst. I know you're out there. I see you. I know you're hiding. And what I want to say is that we don't have a worship band here at New Covenant. We have a worship team. This is a place where there's a place at the table. If you're a musician, you used to be a musician, you have a background in that, I would love to talk to you about that. It's on our Connect card, right down here on the front. Man, you can volunteer for security team and coffee bar, and would you look at that? Worship team. Worship team. I need musicians. Just because you see positions filled every Sunday doesn't mean that there's not room for other folks. All right, so I had to give my sales pitch. I would love to talk to you if you want to be involved with worship ministry. If your last name happens to be Vanzo, I would love to talk to you, all of you.
Oh, been called out.
Busted. Dad was pointing at the son, and I'm like, no, I'm going to out the whole family now. So that's on you. Anyways, we have openings in our sound booth. We have openings with our tech team. If you're not comfortable serving on stage, we have a place for you. I would love to talk to you about that. Okay, sales pitch over. So like Mike said, we have been going through a sermon series as a teaching team about being known. And some of the ground that we've covered every week is what does it mean to be known by God, and what does it mean to be known by others? Now, I have to admit, this is a really intimidating topic for me. I honestly don't remember when our teaching team got together and chose this topic, because I would have been like, can't we just pick a book of the Bible and you give me a text and I get to talk out of it? When we talk about being known, that's something that's deep and personal and intimate. And I was kind of expressing some good-natured frustration to my wife a few weeks ago, like, we have to talk about being known. And that's really intimidating. And she lit up like a Christmas tree. Really? Well, I could tell you all sorts of stuff about being known. And she went on like this 10-minute little sermon about how important it is to be known and how vital it is and how it works within the human body. And so I said, that's awesome. Why don't you take my Sunday? And she said, I'm not going to do that, you big goober, but I will sit up there with you. So if you have not met my wife, maybe you've seen her in the nursery if you have kids, or you've seen her up front on our prayer team, but I thought I would let her tell her a little bit about herself. So this is my wife, Veronica.
Yes, I'm Veronica. By profession, I am a mental health therapist. So the idea of being known, he said I lit up like a Christmas tree. I kind of thought I nerded out on him for what he probably felt like forever. So I just really love being a therapist. I know that I'm called to it. I know that God has equipped me to do that. And there's something about sitting with people one-on-one and walking through and just trudging through the hard process of trying to do life differently and trying to grow that I really love. Like my spirit just rings when I'm able to do that. So that's my scenario. This, where I don't have a person that I'm navigating something with and I'm just kind of talking to a bunch of people, is very different for me, so hopefully that goes okay. Yeah.
Awesome.
I don't know.
Great. Well, it is also Communion Sunday, so if you are joining us in the room, you'll notice that there's elements on the tables around. If you're joining us from home, feel free to take a moment and gather whatever those elements are for you, whether it's bread or juice or wine, whatever you're comfortable with. So before we jump in, let's pray. Let's ask God to come and speak this morning. God, like we sang this morning, you are good, and your goodness is running after us. When we're scared, when we're uncomfortable, when we think we have it all figured out, your goodness is running after me. So God, would you continue to draw us near to your heart this morning? Lord, we invite your presence in this place. Come and move and have your way. Amen. Amen. Well, our lead pastors, Mike and Christy, spoke a lot about the context of being known in marriage. And I thought it would be interesting to go further back in time. We're going to do a little Michael J. Fox. We're going to go back to the future here. I thought it would be fun to go back to an era that all of us have in common. Because there's people in the room right now that aren't married. They've never been married. Maybe they were married before and now they're not. But everyone was a child at some point. Everyone had a childhood. Everyone grew up in a childhood home. Most of us grew up with our parents in the home. And I've told some of my story over the last couple of years of having the privilege to speak on Sunday morning, but in the interest of being known, I thought it would be kind of neat, since we're going to talk about being known, about what it was like, just a little bit of my story. So I grew up in Minnesota back in the 80s. It was fun. That's right, Minnesota. Go North Stars. That's a deep reference, by the way. If you know who the North Stars, hockey team, 1980s, they're awesome. I grew up in an alcoholic home. Both of my parents were alcoholics. And 40 years later, both of my parents are still alcoholics. And it's something that I have had to learn to navigate through. And that was something that I really had to start kind of walking through when I was a kid. And the idea of being known, like we're talking about, is it's really hard when you grow up in a home where there is addiction, where there is alcoholism, things like that. I was fortunate enough to grow up in a home that didn't have any actual abuse. It was just an alcoholic home. It was like a cloud that kind of covered everything. It was like this shady day all the time. And so what does it mean to be known in the midst of that? How are you known to your parents when you don't know what version of them you're going to get on a given morning or a given night? It's a tough question. Who am I? Who am I in this home? Who am I in God's eyes in light of this home? Who are my parents in God's eyes of light of this home? Who is God to me? Who is God the Father in light of who my Father is and all of his brokenness? And even when I got saved, my concept of who God was and who I was in his eyes was under the cloud of who I was as a son in my own home. Now, I was fortunate because when I was 19, I got called into ministry. And I got the opportunity to move across the country to Montana. And it was like I got to push a reset button in some ways on my life. I was no longer Tom and Jill's kid living in this home. I got to just be, well, who am I? I got to figure out, who am I? Who is Sean outside of the cloud of that existence? And I got to discover what it meant to be known in community, in healthy community. Now, I was part of a wonderful church community when I was in high school, but I got to be my own person now. And I got to go to small group, and I got to be known in community. And I got to spend years with this man who was my mentor, the senior pastor of this church, the guy who called me into ministry, whom even now is the most influential person of my entire life. I got to spend years under this guy, under his influence as a father figure. And then, if you spend enough time in Christian community, eventually, we're all sinners saved by grace, right? None of us are perfect. Eventually, you're going to get hurt. Eventually, you're going to get wounded. Somebody's going to hurt your feelings. You're going to hurt somebody else's feelings. And that is a byproduct of letting people in intimately close. Is that if you let them in close enough to love you, you run the risk of letting them in close enough to hurt you. And I know I face this temptation when that happens to kind of just turtle up and pull away and say, I don't want to be known. It's not worth it. It hurts too bad. Community hurts. People hurt me. It's so difficult. And then I got married. And I got to learn, what does it mean to be known now? When you're sharing intimate space with somebody, in those first couple years of marriage especially. Who am I? Who am I to this person? Who is this person? who's in my space now, right? Now, what does it mean to be known to them? What does it mean to be known to them and known to God as a couple? It's just all these different facets of what does it mean to be known. Now, being married, I had to learn something new. I had to learn something that I never did before, and that was how to navigate these emotions, to kind of navigate these situations that I didn't learn when I was a kid, that I didn't learn from my parents. And so up until that point, I had a really good way of navigating emotions. I figured this out along the way, and my brother shares the same thing. You might
It's a
not know
family
this.
trait, I
It's
think.
a family trait. If you push your feelings down far enough, they will come out your toes in the shower. Is that right? That's what I grew up with.
You know, there hasn't been much research done on the push the feelings down and having them come out in the shower. I don't know about that research.
So there's
Maybe
a better
somebody
way.
should do some research on it.
I got 40 years of research doing that.
That's anecdotal.
That's anecdotal. That does not justify anything. So
No.
there's a different way. There's a better way.
Yeah, what I say, which he doesn't like to hear, is that you have to feel to heal. And sometimes Sean says to me, hard pass.
Hard pass. I'm going to take a shower and they come out and they're gone forever.
Never shall they ever
Never
reappear.
shall they be dealt with.
No, it really is. You have to feel to heal, which is hard because that's, in that brokenness of relationship, sometimes we don't want to go there. When I first thought of what is it to be known? What is word association? What comes to my mind? I thought, first I thought that's scary and that's vulnerability. But almost simultaneously, I thought that's where growth and healing happens. Growth and healing happens when we're known. And like Sean said, I went full nerd on him, so about attachment theory. I hope to not go full nerd on you all, but I do want to talk a little bit about attachment theory and just my understanding of it, kind of how the field has progressed. But I don't want to share, I'm not going to go into depth. I'm going to take a really simplified version of it, and I don't want you to walk away going, I should know what attachment theory is now. I want you to walk away knowing that God created us to attach. We are created for relationship. I think every sermon has said that. And the research bears this out. We are meant for relating to people. We're supposed to be doing life in community. And attachment theory started in the late 50s, early 60s. And it shows that your experience is normal, and it shows that there's hope for change. So that's what I want you to take away. Not attachment theory. I want you to take away that there is, transformation is possible, and that's done through relationships. So really quickly about attachment theory, there is 4 what they call attachment styles, and I kind of think of them as relationship patterns. It's a pattern that we learn to relate to people. So they are secure, anxious or avoidant, and disorganized. And I'm not going to spend much time on disorganized. Disorganized comes out of a place of typically really extreme situations or trauma. And folks that have that style, it's not organized, as in the name disorganized. And they pull from all the different styles. So it looks like all of them all at the same time, and it's very confusing. So I'm not going to spend time on that, but just know that it's there. And in the slides you can see I depicted it just so that you can see that it's part of the model, but I'm not going to talk much about it. So the cool thing about what I've learned recently about attachment theory is that the field has moved from understanding it as categories, these 4 categories, to them being on a spectrum. So we have secure in the middle, we have preoccupied or anxious on one side, and we have dismissing or avoidant on the other side. This spectrum is what the field understands now, is that we can change, right? our relationship patterns can morph as we have different relationships. So I want to give an example of how we attach. What's that cycle look like? So for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to look at a toddler. Let's imagine a toddler that's let's say her big brother's having a birthday party, and so there's a bunch of people at the house. Maybe she's a little unsure about all those people. So she's hanging out with her caregiver. Maybe they're sitting on the couch together. And the toddler starts to feel a little more comfortable with all the people, and they climb down on the couch, and they want to go explore. This is the caregiver being like a launching pad. We call that a secure base. So the toddler knows, I know that you're going to be there, and I know that I'm okay, so now I'm going to go explore the world. Say she goes out, she finds a balloon at the party, she's playing with it. Let's say the balloon pops. Imagine the fear and all of those feelings that the toddler is going to experience when this really scary thing happens. Dysregulated, right? Lots of emotions. The toddler then has this behavior of seeking back to the caregiver. So the toddler has this is an action, right? They have to go, oh, I need my caregiver now because the world doesn't seem safe anymore. They seek back to the caregiver. Hopefully the caregiver is available. And the caregiver offers comfort. This is the caregiver being what we call a safe haven or a safe place. It's okay. I can see that you're scared. This is the attachment cycle, right? Then they'll spend some time. They'll feel re-energized. They'll feel more confident. They'll get more regulated. They'll go from dysregulated to regulated, and they'll go explore again. This is a cycle that we have in relationships. And the important aspects of that relationship with the caregiver is that they're available, they're consistent, they're welcoming. Physical touch is important. This idea of regulation. So the caregiver is offering what we call co-regulation. The toddler is dysregulated, comes to the caregiver, and the caregiver maybe looks at them in their eyes and says, I can see that you're afraid. And it's okay now, and I'm here with you. Let's take some deep breaths. Why don't we just sit and be calm for a minute? And that is co-regulation. They're doing it together. Now, there is self-regulation as well. Say the toddler tripped and fell and wasn't hurt, but had a moment of dysregulation. They might check their knees. They might have to take a deep breath. They might have to look around, go, okay, I'm okay. Get back up and go keep going. That's self-regulation versus co-regulation where you do it with somebody else. So remember, that's kind of the cycle that we go through. Now I want to go back to this. Just to give you an idea of what these three categories look like. I'm going to start with preoccupied and anxious. This looks like, this comes from not being sure that the attachment figure, the relationship, is going to be there. So we're striving to keep it. We're clinging on. Striving and clinging are the words that I'm thinking of. I wrote clinging. This is the person that might send you a text message 20 times in 5 minutes. How was your day? Question mark. Are we okay? Question mark. Do you still love me? Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, right?
I see nudging going on.
No calling people out, no calling people out. This is hard stuff. It's hard enough to recognize it in ourselves. We don't need people calling us out on it. These people are reliant more on co-regulation. I'm not sure if I'm okay, but if somebody else can tell me that I am, if somebody else can reassure me that I am, then I'll feel like that I'm okay. So if we look at dismissing and avoidant, which is the other side of that spectrum, they're more aloof, they're kind of standoffish, more independent. They kind of feel like they don't need other people. They're more reliant on self-regulation because they know that they're okay, but they're not sure about other people. Maybe other people have said or have shown that they can't be safe or they can't be trusted. So there's this kind of at arm's length, right? They're saying, I don't have a problem. I don't have any emotions. You have emotions. I don't have a problem. You do. My emotions came out in the shower.
Right. Right. You see the dynamic taking place here, right? Okay, good. Glad we're all on the same page. Good.
Okay, so I just called you out. My
That's
bad.
it. I called me out too. Like anybody's wondering where I am on the scale.
It's true. So now let's look at secure, if we're in the middle. This is the balance of the two. Mike talked about, in the first session, he talked about the left brain being logic-based and the right brain being emotion-based, right? So you can see that on either side. We have more logic-focused or more emotion-focused. Secure is that integrated brain, being able to not utilize one or the other, but recognize that they're both present and depending on the scenario and situation, right? They can both self-regulate and co-regulate. They understand that I'm okay, I'm lovable, but also that other people might be trustworthy. Other people might be able to offer me love. With secure, there's this sense of stability, there's this sense of safety. And here, there's a goal, right? Secure is the goal that we're headed towards. We might feel secure, and then we might not. And that's what the field is talking about now, right? We can, with different relationships or with different seasons in our life, it's not a stagnant thing. They're stable. It's a pattern that we've developed within ourselves. But we're always in relationship, so we're always kind of inching towards something. So if we can now set up in our mind what's our goal, where do I want to head towards, that would be secure. Where do we want to move towards? So that's great, but how do we do it, right? So understanding that this happens and that research shows that this happens is fine, but how? It's through relationship, like we were saying before. We have to be aware of ourselves, and we have to be open to others. Open to God and open to others. And these relationships, I guess I've kind of talked about it, but God can be that relationship, caregivers, peers. Think about how important peers are when we're adolescents, right? Adolescents and on. How influential peers can be, a coach, a pastor, a teacher, romantic partners. All of these relationships have the possibility to impact us if we're open to them. Here's the thing my field misses. Well, at least the secular part of my field. We miss God. God is the perfect attachment figure. There's this quote, just knocked my socks off when I read it. They're talking about God, and she says, God is the ultimate attachment figure. Others are substitutes that may have misrepresented him due to the fallen nature of creation. God is the place, he can be our secure base where we can launch from and go work out our calling in the world. He is our safe haven when the balloon pops in our face and we get dysregulated and we don't know what to do. We can have that seeking back behavior with God and know that he is that ultimate perfect attachment figure. Always available, always welcoming, very consistent.
And Mike has shared from up here before, he says, I'm grateful that I'm an imperfect parent because if I was perfect, my kids wouldn't need Jesus. Right?
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that. It's really important, and I'm sure some of you are thinking about this, right? Like, what have I done to my kids? Or what did my parents do to me? Nobody's perfect. The ideal secure attachment cycle, that cycle does not have to happen every time. There is room for parents to make mistakes. There is room for that, and we're not blaming anybody, or we shouldn't be blaming anybody. Because we don't know their scenario. We don't know where they're coming from. We don't know what their life has been like. We have to understand that they're also existing in their own dynamic place. And sometimes scenarios and situations, right, we don't get to decide what kind of a situation we get put in. And we all do the best we can with what we have. So I don't want this to be weaponized, I guess I'm glad that, against ourselves, right? Or against somebody else. This is information that we can take and go, okay, now how can I do better, right? Now how can I, if I know that this is possible, if I know transformation is possible, how do I move towards that? Yeah. And I think that when we're in a secure place, when we're more secure than we were before, we are better equipped to live out our calling in the kingdom. We're not striving to keep God's love. We're not holding God at bay going, yeah, you don't seem safe, you've been vengeful in the past or something, of that paradigm. We're not avoiding God. But when we're able to stand in that center of secure and know that we are created by him and for him. Ephesians 2:10 says, "For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so that we can do the things that he planned for us long ago." So in order to be God's vessel, we need to embrace ourselves as the masterpiece that we are. Not trying to put on some kind of face or act, but authentically engaging in relationship with him, but then also authentically engaging in relationship with God's people. So now that I kind of gave that frame, I thought that Sean and I would discuss a little bit about, so we know the how, like relationship, but what does that actually look like in relationship with God, and what does that actually look like in relationship with God's people? That we would chat about it.
Yeah. Mike shared a quote a few weeks ago by Tim Keller. Tim Keller is an author. He is a pastor in New York City. And he said this in his book, The Meaning of Marriage. Now, this is it's a book about marriage. It's a quote about marriage, but it really ties into who we are and what does it mean to be known by God. So Tim Keller says this: "When over the years someone has seen you at your worst and knows you with all your strengths and flaws, yet commits him or herself to you wholly, it is a consummate experience. To be loved but not known is comforting but superficial. To be known and not loved is our greatest fear. But to be fully known and truly loved is, well, a lot like being loved by God. It is what we need more than anything. It liberates us from pretense, humbles us out of our self-righteousness, and fortifies us for any difficulty life can throw at us." And I just love that. To be loved and not known is comforting but superficial, and to be known and not loved is our greatest fear. Just really resonated a lot with me.
And I really love the part of that quote. I feel like he's showing the representation that we've talked a lot, I feel like, in Christian communities about how sometimes our views or beliefs about God can be tainted because they're based on a human relationship that was hurtful. But even in this quote, what Tim is saying also is that those relationships can impact our view and experience of God in a positive way as well. And I think that that's important and that shouldn't be lost either.
So having a positive relationship or a positive experience with somebody on church reflects well on God's character as well.
Yeah, so an experience of in my own world is a few months ago, I messed up. I'm not perfect. I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm not perfect, and I messed up, and I was feeling really bad about it. And I did all my self-regulation stuff. It just wasn't cutting it. I called one of my really good friends, and she heard me. She didn't let me off the hook, right? She said, maybe you're overreacting, but yeah, you messed up. But what she did was she walked me through this process. She said, have you received God's forgiveness about this? And I thought, man, I've been a Christian my entire life. I cannot remember a season of my life that I have not intimately sought God. Have I received God's forgiveness about this one specific thing? And she walked me through this beautiful process of, I had already confessed to her, but just her offering forgiveness to me and her praying over me and reminding me and telling me that God has forgiven me for that as well was so impactful in my own view of who God is. Like, I knew about forgiveness, and I have done forgiveness with other people. But the practice of receiving that forgiveness from God, I don't know that I had walked it out like I thought I had until a human relationship opened that up for me. And now I can't even remember what it was that I messed up doing, but I do remember, which I guess is evidence that I received that forgiveness. But I do remember how influential that human relationship was on my relationship with God. So yeah, I think that human relationships can impact our view and understanding of God positively and negatively.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she reflected God's character back to you in that moment. It's like she was holding a mirror at an angle.
In a way that I had never got from the Bible or my Bible studies or my personal prayer time.
Right.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
Yeah. It was very powerful. So some other ideas about how we can relate to God. If we think about this, those kind of three actions in that attachment cycle, the Bible talks about God being in all of those things. God being our secure base. I mean, Jesus sent out his disciples. He was their launching pad, right? Like, they came back. There was some proximity seeking after that, but this is biblical, right? Sermon on the Mount, like, we're sent out because God is that stable and secure base for us to do that with. Go explore yourself, explore your relationships, explore your calling. That proximity seeking, that can look a little abstract because we can't like physically hold God. He can't hold our hands physically and look into our eyes, though I loved the activity that Christy walked us through last week. That was so powerful for me. And that's this proximity seeking, right? All the spiritual disciplines are going to be that. How do I seek back to God? The balloon pops in my face. How do I seek back? It's through those spiritual disciplines. And then I think that God in the Bible is so clear about being our safe haven. There are so many passages, I mean, even in the Psalms, right? You're my refuge. And when I was thinking about this idea of safe haven, I thought of Isaiah 43. This passage has spoken to me in a lot of different times in my life. And I have to say, every time in the Bible, it happens a lot in the Old Testament, where God just emphatically claims people, or claims his people, right? These are my people and I am their God. You belong to me. Every time that happens in the Bible, I am just pierced, because it just rings so true for me that I know I have a place to belong. So I just want to read a little bit out of Isaiah 43. It says, "Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name, and you are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. For I am the Lord your God. You are mine, and I have redeemed you."
Claimed, belonging to no one else. Yeah. So what about relationship with God's people? What does that look like when we walk it out in the world around us?
Well,
To be known in community of God's people.
you know, I was thinking about this, and just this week, my own therapist was talking to me about relationships.
Wait, you have a therapist?
I do.
Even therapists have therapists.
We already covered this. I'm not sure if you caught it, but I'm not perfect. And I don't have it all together. Sometimes I need some co-regulation.
Gotcha.
Yes.
So therapy's good.
Therapy is good. I can speak on it from both sides of the couch. Therapy is good. she was saying that in relationship, we're focused on the relationship between us. And she said, actually what's going on is there's 3 relationships. There's the relationship you and yourself. There's the other person and themselves. And there's the relationship then between them. And if we think about this as what I was already talking about, right, this is self-awareness with myself. The other person has to have self-awareness with themselves. And then we have to have the openness between them. And that was just so powerful to me. I mean, I guess I want to include God in that. I think God is in all of those relationships. Right. But that it just proves the dynamicness of relationship. There's really 3 going on all the time.
Right. And sometimes it's our own brokenness that causes conflict. Sometimes it's the other person's brokenness. Sometimes it's the brokenness between us. Right.
Right.
There's a quote by a Franciscan priest named Richard Rohr. I heard it years ago, and it stuck with me. And it says, if we don't transform our pain, we will always transmit our pain. And that's that relationship with self. If we don't transform it, we will always transmit it. Powerful stuff.
Right, and that's the relationship with myself and God.
Right.
And the relationship with somebody else and God.
Right.
Yeah. And more evidence of how important relationships are, right? Like, no matter what we're doing, that pain is going somewhere in relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
So one other thought that I had about how do we do relationship with other people is that we don't go looking for growth and healing, like being known creates growth and healing. We don't go looking for that on our own. Never once have I had a person show up to therapy and I ask, what do you want to work on? And they're like, well, I'm not sure, but here I am, and I just want to be better. Usually there's a relationship behind it. I'm having trouble at work. My marriage is struggling. I want to be a better parent. I find myself angry all the time. I'm struggling to love myself like I know that God loves me. Right? There's a relationship that has kind of shown the thing that needs growth and healing. And we do that growth and healing for our relationships. I love this. I ran across this quote by Pope Francis. I'm not sure that Pope Francis said it. My research didn't bear that out, but I don't know who did. So
we'll give him credit.
We'll give him credit.
He's the Pope. We'll give him credit.
I just really loved the quote. It says, rivers do not drink their own water. Trees do not eat their own fruit. The sun does not shine for itself, and flowers do not spread their fragrance for themselves. Living for others is a rule of nature. Life is good when you're happy, but it's much better when others are happy because of you. We were talking about this being, like we just did the fruit of the Spirit stuff, right?
Right.
That we bear fruit from our own work to others in relationship.
Right. And so that's how it's lived out in community, is that it's really not about us. It's about others, right?
Yeah. And if we're all doing that, right? If we're all growing and bearing fruit, then the fruit that Sean bears, I get to receive if I'm open. And the fruit that I bear, Sean gets to receive if he's open.
Right. Exactly. So when I thought about this idea of what does it mean to be known, there was one chapter out of the book of Psalms that immediately came to mind, and I wanted to save it to the end because I wanted to walk us through it. Amelia walked us through it a little bit last week, and I wanted to do that again. And it's Psalm 139, and it's written by David, King David. Now, we think about King David, David and Goliath, David the mighty warrior of Israel. David was also an imperfect person. You know, David, the adulterer with Bathsheba. David, the man who killed her husband so he could cover up his own sin. Right? David is a deeply flawed, imperfect person. And he wrote this beautiful chapter about what does it mean to be known by God. David is known in his goodness. David is known in his brokenness. He's known in his imperfection. So I wanted to walk us through this together. And I wanted to encourage you to close your eyes for a minute. David writes this from the first person, and I would like it if we could receive this from the first person. And this is what David, the imperfect king and mighty warrior of Israel, writes. You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my laying down. You are familiar with all of my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. For you created me in my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. And when I awake, I am still with you. What a promise. God knows us. He knows our laying down and our rising, every word before it is spoken, every act on every page before we ever walked it out. Man, where else can we go? I've known a lot of guys that kind of had their own dad issues growing up, and we kind of look through the lens of our earthly father when we look at God. For all of my upbringing, I never had that issue, because when God showed up on the scene in my life when I was 15, and he said, I can be everything your parents weren't, I said, sign me up, man. Sign me up. You're going to be there every day of my life, going out before me and hemming me in from behind. Sign me up. There's no one else I want to know me like you. And that is a promise that we have, and that is an offer that we have. And after reading that psalm, it seems like a wonderful time to remember the sacrifice of Jesus in communion.